Roots on the River has a crazy big, terrific bill on opening day. That's Friday, June 3rd, under the big tent. Newcomer Izzy Sarabrov, Roger Marin with Brock Zeman and Blair Hogan, the Ballroom Thieves with the Maine Youth Rock Orchestra, Delamay, and headliner Dave Alvin doing a solo plus set with Chris Miller from the Guilty Ones. It's our good fortune to have Mr. Dave Alvin on the phone. Hello, Dave.
Hello. Good afternoon, morning, evening. Greetings from the West Coast.
You have packed a lot of living into your time, and I've taken the liberty of reducing your life to about a dozen bullet points for people who might not be familiar with your comings and goings. But they're all really interesting bullet points, and I hope you'll jump in to expand on any of them that you want to. This first bullet point does not count. You were born 6 years and 1 day before I was, and you've achieved considerably more success, so from me to you, well done, sir.
What are you, November 12th?
Yeah.
My fellow Scorpion.
That's right. I share my day with Charles Manson and Neil Young.
That's a hell of a combo. I got Mose Allison, Kurt Vonnegut, and Leonardo DiCaprio.
You win.
Mose Allison definitely kind of puts me, yeah, that's a nice birthday to share. Actually, and that's also, I share it with Chris Smither.
Mm.
I'm sure you've heard of, yeah. So me, Chris Smither, Mose Allison, and, Kurt Vonnegut, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, I had such a huge crush on Vonnegut when I was a boy.
Yeah. He could be a great writer.
Yeah. You grew up in the next town over from Billy Goat Acres in the hometown of Richard and Karen Carpenter and the oldest operating McDonald's and the first Taco Bell, Downey, California.
You've done your research.
You got interested in good music young thanks to unusually tasteful family and friends.
Yeah, and also where we grew up had a lot of places you could hear music in those days, music from all over America, because, you know, we grew up in an area in the southeast side of L.A. County that was the working class sort of area. And so people from the South, Midwest, the East Coast, and all that, from Mexico, from Texas, from wherever, all came and brought their music. And so in those days you could hear especially a lot of like blues and rhythm and blues just in clubs, you know, neighborhood bars and things. And of course, you know, great country music, old style country music in neighborhood bars, things like that. So yeah, it was a good place to grow up, actually. You know, if you wanted to find the music, you could.
Somewhere along the line, I read that Downey had the busiest intersection in the county back in the day.
Yeah, the intersection of Lakewood and Firestone, because before the freeways. Mm-hmm. Downey was a rural town. The whole area was rural, and either, you know, orange groves, avocado groves, dairy farms, things like that. And so Firestone was the road that got you into L.A., mm-hmm. which is L.A.'s about 20 miles away. Yeah, so that's why it was the busiest intersection. You're going pretty obscure. So I'm impressed.
You started learning real music at the feet of the masters, like T-Bone Walker, Lee Allen, Big Joe Turner, in part by sneaking into bars when you were underage.
Yes, sir. I don't recommend it to everybody. Parents, beware. But, you know, sometimes to fall in love with something, you have to see it with an air of mystery. Mm. To me, there was something about pulling back the asphalt cookie cutter modern American society, and right underneath that veneer was this wonderful, mysterious, wild world of that traditional music, so rhythm, blues. I was Alice in Wonderland, you know, as a kid.
And it inspired you to teach yourself how to play guitar?
Kinda, yeah. It intimidated me for years, just because I'd seen everyone. I was 12 years old. I saw Jimi Hendrix twice. That'll either make you a guitar player or intimidate you. For me, it did both.
Well, you kind of got over it, formed a band with your brother Phil and a couple other local guys called the Blasters back in '79. And that band ended up doing a whole lot to help shape the good parts of the current American roots music scene.
Oh, well, thanks. We tried. I don't want to take too much credit, but we certainly deserve some credit, yeah.
Yeah. The band Queen caught one of the shows back in '80, booked the band to open for part of their tour, which was weird. And after the dust settled, there was some good visibility, but it sounds like it was kind of hairy.
Yeah, I'll just say you haven't really lived until you've had 17,000 angry classic rock Queen fans throwing things, booing, throwing things, hating your guts, basically. You know, it'll definitely spice up your day.
You went on to consort with punks, alt-rockers, and the generally crazed. You played with the Flesh Eaters, X, the Knitters, Gun Club, and the Pleasure Barons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's all fun, you know.
You left the Blasters in '86 for an eclectic solo career, performer, songwriter, producer, sideman, poet, occasional actor, and endlessly touring musician.
Yeah. Well, you got to pay the bills, you know.
Yeah.
But the way I view it is, you know, when it all comes down, basically, you know, answering the previous question and this question, it's just about everything I've done is organic to me. It's not like there's a think tank that comes up with this idea and says, okay, your next record's going to be electronic disco music, you know, so way to get the kids. If you cut me open, I'm basically a blues player. Mm-hmm. I just see things sort of like Ray Charles, though. You know, Ray certainly brought the blues to just about everything he did, whether it was singing Cole Porter or Buck Owens. And that's kind of the way I try to view it. You know, I'll never be Duke Robillard. I'll never be Ronnie Earl. So I have to just follow my own instincts. So that's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
As a songwriter, I let the songs dictate musically what they are, you know. One of the few complaints I have about the Blasters was the band dictated what the song sounded like, you know, which is true for most bands. Mm-hmm. Meaning if I brought in a polka, the band would say, we don't play polkas. And as a solo artist, if I wake up tomorrow morning and write a polka, I'll just go record a polka. I don't have to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. What's that quote? There's two kinds of folk, something like that. Hard.
Yeah. There is. There's two types of folk music. There's quiet folk music and there's loud folk music, and yeah, I dabble in both. That's what I do. If you want to get all musicologists on it, there was always two types of folk music in the past, in the 19th and the 20th century. There was the ballads, you know, sentimental songs, the balladry, the murder ballads, things like that, which were more, I don't know if the word's quiet, but they were more word-driven, more lyric-driven. And then on the other side, there was what musicologists called social music, which basically translates to dance tunes, the fiddle songs, the things people would dance at gatherings, family gatherings, things like that. And that kind of expresses itself now. For me, I see it as you have singer-songwriters that do beautiful, wonderful songs that you sit and listen to. And then you have a band that plays Chicago blues or rockabilly or Western swing or whatever. And that's the social side of folk music. That's that tradition, you know, that's dance music. That's social music. Get together with people and maybe have some moonshine or whatever, some Bud Light, and then you dance, you know. At some point in time, maybe in the 60s, it got translated into or redefined folk music as a sensitive singer-songwriter sitting with an acoustic guitar at a coffee house. But it certainly can be that, but it's a lot more than that.
I was talking to Mark Miller from Spite and Dival the other day as part of this series, and he got into how good folk music is timeless and why being precious about preserving it like some museum thing just isn't in the spirit of what it's all about.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm kind of down the middle. I think that there's certainly a place for preservation.
Sure.
There are some artists that I hear that we'll call them preservation artists that I think are great. Mm-hmm. And then there are other artists that aren't very good at preservation, you know, and they're just more interested in finding their own interpretation of it. I recorded a song years ago called Blackjack David, which is like maybe the Louie Louie of folk music. And the thing is, those songs, nobody owns them. I don't own that song, you know, and the way I did it was not exactly traditional. And the people that do it in the traditional style, they don't own it either. It's a folk song. It doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to all of us. So because of the music belongs to all of us, you can do whatever you want with it. I think the main thing is that you keep it alive. That's the only thing.
You scored a Grammy for your 2001 album, Public Domain, Songs from the Wild Land. Traditional folk and blues. How did you handle that?
Each song got handled differently. There's one or two numbers on there that are pretty traditional approaches, and then there's some songs on there that aren't traditional approaches. I worked in things like Chicago blues and rockabilly and even sort of Memphis R&B and some of it. You know, again, just let the song talk to you and let the song tell you, you know, let's sound like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just follow that. Make it organic. Again, I have a lot of respect for people that can play 17th century British folk music note for note like you would have heard it in the 17th century. I think that's great. I'm not good at it, but somebody else is. I think both approaches are valid.
The 2014 album that you did with your brother Phil, Common Ground, that was nominated for a Grammy too. And there's a new one where you guys are paying tribute to a lot of your formative influences.
Yeah. It's kind of going back, both the Big Bill Broomsey record and then the latest one, Lost Time, is what I called the album, and that's really what it is. I'm making up for 30 years of lost time of making music with my brother. And there are certain musicians, songwriters that we loved all of our lives, you know, and some of them were friends, like Big Joe Turner was a lifelong friend and mentor to us. And so we do 4 Big Joe songs on the record because my brother can do, you know, a pretty good tribute to Big Joe. Big Joe was his vocal teacher when my brother was a teenager, and we'd never really cut that. When my brother and I were in the Blasters together, we never really recorded Big Joe Turner type material. And it was like, you know, we should do that. We may not live forever. Let's pay tribute to Joe. And and you know, I was friends with Willie Dixon, so we did one of Willie's songs, and then there's songs by heroes of mine that I never met, that died decades before I was born, people like Leroy Carr and Led Belly and people like that. So it's a little bit all over the map, but they're all different ways of playing the blues. You know, they're all kind of uniquely different unto themselves.
I think it's great that you and Phil are working together again. It's a drag. You had to face mortality for it to happen, but you know, it's going to happen to all of us.
Yeah, you know, both he and I have lost our closest friends, and our mother and father have been gone for a long time now, and it was just, especially when we lost our closest friends, it was just okay. You know, and then my brother died and was brought back to life, and that was the final straw. I was like, you know, we should probably make some music together. You know,
we've been losing way too many musicians lately.
Yeah. 2016 is a terrible year.
We're getting old, aren't we?
Yeah, I guess so. You know, but we're getting better looking. That's the catch. You know?
You are on the very cool Yep Rock Records Roots Rock label these days. Yeah,
Yep Rock's kind of all over the place. They're a good label. They let me do pretty much whatever I want, and that makes me happy.
The Impossible to Find First Blasters album, recorded in a living room, 1980, 22 songs.
In a garage.
In a garage.
In a garage, yeah.
22 songs in 2 days.
Yeah.
That's something that's been coming up with a lot of the artists that I've been talking to who are playing this year. There's a real resurgence of, well, it's studio recording, but with the whole band live in a room with no clicks or dubs.
Yeah. I've recorded everything from, everybody in a garage to, you know, I've been involved in recording sessions, not my own in particular, but I've been involved in recording sessions where they start with the kick drum. You know, that was really something that happened a lot in the 80s. I imagine it still happens today. they start with the kick drum, then they'll put on the cymbals, and then they'll put on the snare, and I think for me, the magic of digital recording and finding the right engineers and the right rooms. You can certainly record wonderfully with everybody just looking at each other. My records are made with everybody roughly in a circle looking at each other. It's really the only way you can record roots music and make it sound decent. It's hard to do roots music and make it sound just have it the life and breath and the funkiness that it deserves if you don't have everybody looking at each other while you're playing.
Another thing that's been coming up repeatedly with a lot of the artists is there's a direct line with a lot of them from the punk scene into Americana.
Yeah, punk rock is it's a term. It doesn't really mean anything. Neither does Americana. What's punk rock to one person is not punk rock to another. Mm-hmm. And they both consider themselves experts on punk rock. I'm not an expert on punk rock. I lived through that era, and I certainly played in those bands and this, that, and the other. But what I consider punk rock is, if you ask somebody 5 years younger, they'll tell you that old man's crazy.
Yeah.
To me, it's just music.
Yeah.
And, maybe it's more, for lack of a better term, amateuristic. It's not jazz, It's not somebody that graduated Juilliard. Or, on the other hand, maybe it could be. Yeah, who knows? I can hear something and say, well, that's this. Oh, that's Kansas City jazz. Oh, that's Georgia acoustic blues. Oh, and that's West Coast punk rock circa 1979. I can do that. But on the other hand, I'd just rather not. Whatever the music is, it'll speak to me. I don't get too into those kind of terms.
Yeah. For me, punk always just comes back to energy.
Yeah, it kind of, I think the thing that people that weren't alive in the 70s don't realize is just how bad a lot of the music was. There was a lot of great music, everything from, you had Bob Dylan made Blood on the Tracks in the 70s. Yeah, that's hard to top. You had Al Green in the 70s. You had some great songwriters. Tom Waits made great records in the 70s. Jackson Browne made great records. There was some great stuff, and then there was just some garbage. And then I think there was also a cultural backlash because everything became cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And everything became was the beginning of everything being marketed and test marketed and this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of us that were young then, it was hard to get in the late 70s and into the 80s. It was hard to get on the radio because of prejudices against hairstyles and ways of playing and things like that. So punk rock to me, in the good sense, was just a way of trying to blow all that up. I think the do-it-yourself ethos of punk rock and to be honest, and I'm going to get shot, I'm sure, by saying this, but a lot of especially the early punk rock people, really weren't that different than, say, the people in Haight-Ashbury. It really wasn't. It's just a counterculture. Kind of like when in jazz, when bebop, which was the sort of punk rock of jazz, when bebop became mainstream, then the guys that played it wanted to go play a different type of music, wanted to go play free jazz or something. So it happens in everything.
You have published 2 collections of poetry in your writings. You've had stuff in periodicals and anthologies.
I studied poetry in college, so that's what I do. I kind of think that way. I'm not a quote-unquote poet, but I'm a pretty good songwriter when I sit down and seriously do it. I'm not bad. It's just different. I just see things and you make connections in your brain. Say, well, I want to tell a story about this. I'm upset about the price of bird feed, but I don't want to write a song called I'm upset about the price of bird feed. So you figure, how do I tell that story about me being upset at the price of bird feed without coming out and saying it and making it overly political or overly sanctimonious?
And from time to time, you do prose. My friend Jeremy tells me you wrote a chapter for a book I haven't read yet, John Doe's memoir.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a memoir, but yeah, John had a good idea of getting a bunch of people that were survivors of the late 70s, early 80s punk rock days to all write a chapter about what it was like for them. And yeah, it was a nice thing to do because we are reaching that age. About 10 years ago, books started coming out about that period of time, and some of them were okay, and some of them were really wrong. And so, yeah, John had the idea of, well, why don't we get the people that are still alive now that we're hitting into the history zone, get the people that were really part of it, not outsiders, to write the friggin' book. And so, yeah, that was a nice thing.
Is there anything going on lately that really has your juices flowing or gets your gander up, for that matter?
My gander up or my juices flowing?
Either one.
I won't mention any names, but there's certain, musicians that I admire and like. I'll mention one name. I'm a fan of a young sort of blues performer named Blind Boy Paxton. I think is great. I'm always looking for somebody to make me go, wow.
You've played Roots on the River before.
Yeah.
How does the festival in Vermont in general strike you? You going to move here?
If you could work on that snow thing, it'd be a beautiful place to live. No, I love Vermont. It's gorgeous. Vermont's great. The weird thing is I've never played in my 30-some years of playing music. I've never played Burlington. One of these days I'm going to play Burlington.
That's just weird.
It's incredibly weird. I know.
When musicians come to Vermont, they go there.
Yeah.
Thank you for breaking that trend. What should people expect when they come to see you play at Roots? It's a solo plus set.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. A little bit of the blues and balladry and a little bit of social music. Let's put it that way. It'll be a wide variety. It'll be songs I wrote. It'll be some of the old blues things. Basically, kind of all over the place.
You're bringing Chris Miller. Is there anything you want to say about him while he's not here to defend himself?
Chris has played with me off and on for many years. He's one of my favorite guitar players. He never ceases to amaze me in what he plays and the breadth of what he plays. He can play like blues, like Magic Sam, or he can play like Buck Owens' guitar player, Don Rich. And that's what I need in a guitar player.
It's going to be a great set.
Well, hopefully, yeah.
I hope you'll indulge me for just one last thing. We've got a really great guy here at the station. For years, he's been doing a show Monday nights. It's called Border Radio. It's named after the Blasters song.
Wow.
He's going to be there for the show, but he's up in Alaska right now for a visit. Would you be willing to do a quick promo for his show that we can surprise him with?
Sure.
Border Radio. He goes by Border Pete. It's Black
Border
Sheep.
Pete.
Yeah, Black Sheep Radio, Wool, Monday nights, 8 to 10. Whatever you want to riff on is fine.
All right, ready?
Sure.
Hey, this is your old friend Dave Alvin, and whenever I'm in Bellows Falls, you can be darn sure I'm listening to Border Pete's Border Radio.
That's great. Thank you so much for doing that.
You got it, man. All righty, we'll see you at the gig.